The real BMF is back, and this time he will dominate. Gilbert Burns vs Belal Muhammad is set for UFC 288 in New Jersey as the co-main event. And although on paper a lot of people think this actually could be a relatively close matchup, in my opinion I do think Gilbert Burns is a superior fighter, and I do think he has the potential to dominate this matchup and look great while doing it. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionated MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Gilbert Burns has had a wild couple of months so far this year. Originally, he wasn't able to find an opponent, and him and the UFC eventually settled on Neil Magny, who seemed to be the only guy that was willing to take that matchup, and in that matchup in Brazil in January, Gilbert ended up finishing the fight very easily with a submission in round 1. Then after that, Gilbert finally got that money fight he was looking for and got a matchup against Jorge Masvidal in a huge matchup in Miami in April, where he once again basically dominated that fight, although it was a decision victory. And then a couple weeks after that, he once again agreed to the first matchup he was offered against Belal Muhammad for this upcoming UFC event at UFC 288 in New Jersey. And I made a video in the past talking about how I thought Gilbert Burns was the real BMF, but when you look at this 3-fight stretch that he's on in the past 3 or 4 months, it really proves it. Fighting 3 guys in a 3 or 4 month span is difficult for anybody, but especially when you talk about the caliber of guys that Gilbert's going up against, it proves how much of a savage this guy is. But looking forward to this current matchup he has coming up against Belal Muhammad, I do think Gilbert has the potential to have a lot of success. But before we get into that specific matchup, let's look at Gilbert's game from top to bottom and see what he does well out there. So starting with his stand-up ability, I would say Gilbert is a pretty good striker out there. He has a nice ability to throw at that jab, that left straight, nice uppercuts, really nice hooks, and overall I would say he has decent boxing technique. But really what gets him by for the most part is the power and speed that he does possess. He clearly has the power to knock guys out with one punch, as he has knocked out opponents in the past, and even rocks Kamaru Usman, who has a phenomenal chin. Now Gilbert also has a decent ability to throw kicks out there to the legs, to the body, and very rarely to the head, but mostly what Gilbert does well out there is he mostly utilizes his boxing in terms of his stand-up abilities. But now moving on to his ground game, this is definitely the best part of Gilbert's game. Gilbert has tremendous jiu-jitsu. He's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the entire UFC. He does a phenomenal job at prioritizing the position over the submission, and we especially saw this in his Neil Magny matchup, where he was mostly looking for the position, and eventually once he found a position he was comfortable with, then he eventually attacked the submission and ended up getting that submission in that matchup. And this is something that's extremely important, because if you attack the submission too early, you can then give up your position and the opponent can easily get up from that and could put you in a situation that you don't want to be in. But the fact that Gilbert always prioritizes the position, in my opinion, makes him so good on the ground and so dangerous. And when you talk about a guy in Belal Muhammad who he's going up against that has a very wrestler-centric approach, I think the jiu-jitsu could really come in handy in this particular matchup against Belal. Now in terms of Gilbert's chin, in the past people have said he has a terrible chin, but in my opinion I actually don't agree with this anymore, as we did see him prove to have a pretty good chin against Khamzat Chimaev and also against Jorge Masvidal in his most recent matchup. But overall, from top to bottom, I would say Gilbert does a lot of good things at all levels, and he's an overall very dangerous fighter. But now, let's get into this specific matchup between Gilbert and Belal, and let's get into my prediction for this matchup. So clearly, a lot of people expect this to be a close fight, as the odds are extremely close, and Belal is a top 5 guy in the welterweight division, so clearly he has skill. Belal is a guy who has really good wrestling, has pretty decent striking ability, a good chin, pretty good cardio. In all honesty, I see Belal as a slightly worse Colby Covington. And although I do think Belal is very good in a lot of different areas, I just think Gilbert Burns is a superior fighter. I think in terms of the stand-up, Gilbert is definitely the superior striker. He just has the more power in his hands, he has a better technique in my opinion, and he's also a lot quicker than Belal is. So I definitely think if the fight stays on the feet, Gilbert is going to have a pretty decent advantage. But even when the fight goes to the ground, although Belal does have the better wrestling, Gilbert is clearly the far superior jiu-jitsu practitioner, as even a guy in Khamzat Chimaev was reluctant to take the fight to the ground against Gilbert. So I think due to that fact, Gilbert can also have a lot of success on the ground, and even if he's getting out wrestled for the most part, he can easily find a submission quickly and end up submitting Belal Muhammad and finishing the fight that way. Overall, I think a big reason for why I see Gilbert Burns winning this matchup, and overall why I see him dominating this matchup, is I just think he's a lot more dangerous than Belal is. Belal is very skilled and very talented, of course, but he's not all that dangerous. And I really do think the more dangerous fighter just has more overall methods of victory, and due to that, I think they just have a better chance to win. Because when you look at Gilbert Burns in this matchup, I think he can win by TKO, I think he could win by submission, and I also think he could win by decision. But when you look at Belal Muhammad, I think the only real way he could possibly win this matchup is by wrestling for 5 rounds and getting the decision victory over Burns. But my official prediction for this matchup is I think Gilbert Burns is going to win this matchup by decision. As I mentioned before, I do think he has the potential to win by TKO or submission, but overall Gilbert wins most of his matchups by decision, and I do think Belal is an overall very good and very talented fighter, and I do see him having the ability to stick in there and stay all 5 rounds with Gilbert Burns, especially considering Belal has pretty good cardio. Now at the same time, with that being said, I do see Gilbert hurting Belal a couple times, but overall I do think it's going to be a decision victory for Gilbert Burns, but at the same time I still do think Gilbert is going to dominate the fight for the most part. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this matchup between Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad at UFC 288, which is right around the corner at this point, and a matchup I'm extremely excited for. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Gilbert Burns has the potential to dominate this matchup over Gilbert Burns at UFC 288, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.